Go tell Aunt Rhody. Go tell Aunt Rhody. Go tell Aunt Rhody that the old gray goose is dead. It died in the mill pond. It died in the mill pond. It died in the mill pond, standing on its head. The Lake Association is weeping. The Lake Association is weeping. The Lake Association is weeping. The old gray goose is dead. Killed by the dyequat. Killed by the dyequat. Killed by the dyequat. The old gray goose is dead. Killed by the road salt. Killed by the road salt. Killed by the road salt. The old gray goose is dead. The town folk are weeping. The town folk are weeping. The town folk are weeping. The old gray goose is dead. Hello, everybody. This is Brian O'Haron, version 6 of Spreading the Word. I'd like to say tonight that I am partially to blame for the position that the town is in now, with various members of the Highland Lake Watershed Association. And they're not in my backyard supporters dominating the commissions and committees in town, trying to keep people from developing in their backyard. I won't go into it in great detail tonight because I have discussed it in many other programs of spreading the word. But both Joyce and I had experiences on the lake when we were children. We grew to like the lake, and many years later, when I retired, we decided to come back to the area and live in our cottage that was built in 1926 and enjoy life with our relatives, friends, and all of the other things that this area has to offer. I might tell you a little bit about my background. Again, this is repetition, but many of you may have not heard this before. I had many important positions in business around the world. I've traveled 10 million miles. I've been all behind the Iron Curtain. I've been in all the socialistic countries trying to get work done as a young American, which is not easy. I was president of Internet Systems Corporation for a few years and had a partial interest in the company until it was sold. I was president and COO of Grundy Environmental Systems, which was one of the biggest environmental system equipment producers for limnologists and oceanographers around the world. And as I said many times in the past, we supplied instruments to people like Jacques Cousteau and the major governments of the world that wanted to study the ocean to a depth of 4 miles deep. So I had quite a bit of experience around water. I had quite an experience around the world in socialistic and communistic countries trying to get things done for the American capitalistic system. We lived in 8 cities, some twice, and we lived in 4 countries, some twice, and I was able, wherever the American government allowed, to go into all these countries to help our customers implement their major computer systems, banks, airlines, governments, things like that. So I had a lot of experience. And when I came back in 2002, I found out a lot about the Highland Lake Watershed Association that I didn't know when I was paying the dues over the 40 years or so as a member of the Highland Lake Watershed Association. And when I got back here, I began to see how they were conducting themselves and how difficult it was for people to work in the environment because they didn't want condos on the lake. And some members on the east side of the lake wanted to raise the taxes of those on the west Wakefield side of the lake for view taxes, things like that. And I began to wonder about this Highland Lake Watershed Association. The only thing that I really knew about them when I was away for 40 years or so was that they had some pretty wild parties, and a lot of people didn't want to go to them because they were cautious. I never personally went to any of them. I was never here anyway. And once I get back and I heard all the rumors about how the Highland Lake Watershed Association was conducted, and I read some of their papers that they sent out to the members, I decided to drop my membership and our membership and not be part of the Highland Lake Watershed Association because I didn't agree with the things that they were doing. Now, they did come to me many times and ask for money. They always want money, and they do want you to be a member. And the money wasn't the problem for me. The problem for me was that I didn't agree with the way they were conducting themselves when it came to growing the grand list for the town and the lake and Winchester. When I discussed that with them, they said, well, we pay 25% of the taxes, so we want more things for the lake and the Highland Lake District. And I said, well, I'm not giving you the money because I don't understand or agree with the way you want to spend the money. Rather than dredge the coves and help to improve the lake for people to use, you're moving more in the direction of not letting the town people enjoy the lake. You want to buy the land and put it in the land trust. That's one of the big things they asked me for, money to buy a piece of land on top of the cliffs on West Wakefield Boulevard to put in the land trust. Personally, I thought that was a waste of money. They said, yeah, if we don't buy that piece of land, people will see houses up there from across the lake, and we don't want that to happen. They were also heavily involved in stopping the 36 or so condos that a gentleman was trying to build on West Wakefield Boulevard. They ended up getting 4 or 5 of them built, but that's because they already had some small buildings on the land and they could do it. And they were very much against developing the 660 acres where the major developments were going to be and the golf course. And it would have provided a lot of very advantageous tax to the town, and it would have provided water and sewer down the industrial corridor between Torrington and Winsted, Old Route 8. That would have allowed other businesses to move into that area in an easier manner. It's hard down there to have any kind of business because you do need water for the sprinkling systems that are required in factories and businesses. And you have a lot of shale in the ground and things that make septic systems more difficult to implement. So the development was going to give water and sewer to that area, as well as a good deal of taxes. Now, instead of trying to find a way to make it happen in a responsible manner, they decided, with the help of other people in the town and city, to fight it and try to kill it. They were looking for Indian burial grounds. They were blaming the people for being crooks. They did all kinds of things, working at the state level and the town level to try to fight that development and other developments around. And the Not in My Backyard people from all over the city joined together to help each other keep things out of their own backyards. Now, I think, personally, that the Highland Lake Association does a lot of things for publicity, but when it comes down to really doing the basics, they're not too good at that. But anyway, when they kept asking me for money and saying that they were paying 25% of the tax base, I was interested at that time in developing my own properties and getting permits and things like that. I suggested to one of the leaders of the Highland Lake Watershed Association, one of the main people on it, that they get more involved in the town business and represent themselves. They said that's kind of difficult because we're not supposed to, according to our charter, we're not supposed to get involved in politics. I guess that's because they're always soliciting money from people on a tax advantage basis to be able to buy land, to put in the land trust, and things like that. I'm not an expert on all that. I didn't read their charter. I might have years ago, but can't remember it all now. So they took me up on it. And you can blame me now a bit, because I suggested to them that they get involved in the town business. I didn't suggest to them that they take it over, like they have done, and take over all the major boards, commissions, and committees, and make believe that they're trying to do good for the town, when they're really trying to retard the growth in their own backyards. I don't agree with that. I think they should be working with the town to help balance the growth and stop fighting with the town and trying to squeeze the town people from using the lake. They do this in many ways. They fight people who try to get permits. They keep trying to keep people from using the boat parking area and launching boats. So you see them in the road waiting their turn in the summer on Saturdays and Sundays for hours and hours. They'll go around the lake 1 or 2 days a year, providing they have a photographer from the newspapers there to take their picture. But I see many of them walking on the lake daily that don't bend over to pick up any papers whatsoever. And I got a kick out of it, and I mentioned it to one of them one time, that whenever they go out on their yearly one-day paper pickup, maybe it's twice a year, beginning and end of summer, they wear their Highland Lake Watershed Association T-shirts. And I said, why do you do that? And they said, oh, we do that so everybody knows who we are and doesn't give us any trouble picking up papers when we walk around the lake on these special days. And I said, well, I walk every day on the lake. And if I see a piece of paper or tin cans or bottles or old McDonald's wrappers or things from the other areas of town, that are thrown around the road, I pick them up. I pick them up and I put them in people's garbage cans that are out waiting for the garbage man to pick up each week. Most people let me do that, and they don't give me any trouble whatsoever. And we try to keep our property as clean as we can, and we try to keep the lake as clean as we can. We don't need a special day with special t-shirts and a picture in the paper. When we were kids, and you probably all were the same way, we were taught to do things for others quietly and not expect a lot in return. Help others, but don't expect a lot in return. The Highland Lake Watershed Association can't do anything without a lot of publicity, so people think they're doing good, when they're actually doing, in my view, more harm than they are good. So I don't belong to the Highland Lake Watershed Association after paying dues there for many, many, many years, because I don't like what they're doing to the town and to the majority of the lake people that have non-conforming properties. I don't like it at all, so I'm not a member. Now, when I was trying to develop my properties, I had a lot of problems with the various boards and commissions in town, especially the Inland Wetlands Commission, because I had to get permits. And it was very difficult to get any permit, especially for the lake non-conforming properties. Some permits that my predecessors had, the tulips on one of the bigger pieces of property, had to be renewed when I bought the property. So I went down and tried to renew them, and I couldn't get them renewed. I got a lot of trouble from the Inland Wetland Commission, especially from their chairperson, Althea Perez, at the time. And while I was trying to get these permits to rebuild some of the things on the lake, she quietly tried to change the regulations to make it tougher to get certain things done in the water, like docks and floats and things like that, and piers. They didn't even want you to repair a pier that you had for 100 years at that time. So, after leaving the Highland Lake Watershed Association and not giving them any more dues to misspend, I walked around the lake. I was retired and had the time and the need. I walked around the lake and still got the petition upstairs, and I had people sign a petition that I could present to the selectmen in town asking for balance in the inland wetlands regulations, that it would allow people to do things that they wanted to do. Well, needless to say, a lot of people signed the petition because they were in need and they didn't agree with the changes that the chairman, Perez, wanted to implement into the regulations. So I went with about 10 other people that had signed the petition, lived around the lake, to the selectmen meeting, and they asked, after hearing the people speak, they thanked me, and they asked for the Inland Wetlands Commission to reform a committee to look at these regulation changes, a balanced committee, and rewrite them if necessary. And they did that. And they asked me to be on the committee, and the committee was balanced. And we did come up with, after about a year, maybe a year and a half, I finally dropped off the committee when I saw I couldn't do any more good there because they were doing a very good job. I had other things to do. But anyway, they came up with a good set of regulations, and they got approved, and we've had peace on the lake for 10 years when it comes to water issues. There's still one argument that persists, and that's how often they do the drawdown. When I was fixing one of my cottages, when I was on the road, I think I was living overseas at the time, I had to wait for the 8-foot drawdown. Small building that was being ruined by the ice because you could only do it when the water was down 8 feet. Since then, it's fluctuated. Now it's about 5 years before it goes down 8 feet. And that makes it difficult for people to repair their walls. And the only reason they need the walls, didn't many years ago, is because over the last 175 years, the water's been raised 8 feet, wiping out all the beaches of the people who did have cottages on the lake, the beaches in front of their house. You can still see the sand in front of a lot of them, and doing a lot of detriment to the public beaches that I went to as a child and enjoyed. So we won that one. That'll be in my book. And then the Highland Lake Watershed Association took my advice, and probably the advice of others, and they began to try to strengthen their group. I encourage people not to join it, still do. I want to see people do good, and I think they can do more good outside of the Watershed Association than they can do inside. But anyway, they strengthened themselves, and they began to take over the committees and commissions in the town, which now they control most of, especially the ones that are most important, like planning and zoning and the Zoning Board of Appeals. They're also had somebody running the EDC, and they have somebody running the Friends of Main Street, and they have somebody running the Civil Service Commission, etc., etc. Now, in my view, most of this is a fake. It's like in basketball. You fake one way, and you go the other, hoping to catch people off balance. And that's kind of what they're doing here in this town. They say they're trying to improve the town, but what they're really trying to do, quietly and secretly, out of the view of most people, is retard the growth in such a way that less people come to the lake and use its beaches, put boats in the water, and walk around or ride around on the roads. If they had their way, there would be a lot less activity around Highland Lake and on the lake by town and state residents. And as you know, all state residents can use this lake. The state owns the boat launch. We had a chance to buy it many years ago, buy the property, and didn't do it. So the state moved in, they bought the property, and they now own the boat launch. They're also in control of the water from the end of the property surrounding the lake to the center of the lake. So we have to follow all their rules, which is good. They are in favor of improving the lake and keeping the lake in good condition. Now, we do some things here. And remember, I was president, chief operating officer, one of the biggest water quality instrument makers in the world. For 7 years, they didn't know that when I came back. Nobody knew that. And they tried to tell me that rocks fall up. Engineers used to tell me, Brian, when they try to tell you rocks fall up, That's not good, because rocks don't fall up. They fall down. But they try to tell you that rocks fall up while they're doing things here. And by the way, they were certain people in the Highland Lake Watershed Association that fought these. It's a mixed thing along the way, and their boats were sank and all that kind of stuff. But they didn't want to have sewers around the lake. They didn't want to have condos on the lake. They really didn't want to have a lot of boats on the lake, and still don't. Things like this. And in some cases they were right. In others, they were not right. They don't know enough. They used to complain to me that our own environmental consultant didn't give them enough specific direction, but always asked for more information, more study. Well, there's a reason for that. These limnologists and experts, they want to know exactly what's going on before they give advice about the number of times to draw down the lake, about whether or not drawing down the lake does any good or not for the life of the lake, whether putting diquat, a poison, into the lake to kill the weeds is good or bad. It doesn't actually kill them, it just maims them. And as Darwin said, they grow back stronger when you try to kill them and you try to maim them. They'll come back stronger. Some lakes won't put in this. I know in Winchester, they avoid putting any of this diquat into their lake, and they try to cut the weeds instead with mowing machines, preserve the lake for as long as they can. Now, I've said on other programs, and I'll say it again, all lakes die over a long period of time. We're about halfway through the life with our lake. We can extend it. We can extend it by not putting salt on the roads in the winter. That kills the trees and washes into the lake, kill other things. We can extend it by getting money to dredge the coves and other parts that might need it. We can extend it by aerating the lake, like many lakes have been done. If you read in the papers, especially in the last few months, all the lakes seem to be in trouble in the area, some of whom have already had dredging, some of whom have already had aeration, because all lakes die. And one of the things I learned when I was in the business was the Grand Coulee Dam will fill up in 1,000 years if somebody doesn't pay attention. 1,000 years, that dam will fill up. But most lakes die over a long period of time. You can retard that. You can slow it down. And a lot of the people on the Highland Lake Watershed Association, or a few of them anyway, do have that in mind and are working towards that. They often don't win when they did try to stop the sewers around the lake because they thought more people would build houses and live on the lake if they did that, and that turned out to be true, of course. But we do have one of the cleaner lakes in the state. How long it will remain that way is hard to tell. But the lake has taken over your town, and they retarded your growth of your grand list. Greatly retarded the growth of your grand list. And they're trying to fake you out by doing little things around town, like putting lights down in the center and planting flowers in the strip that many of the people who own the businesses don't even like to see, the median strip, because it stops traffic from getting into their business in an easy manner. So anyway, there's a lot going on here. I would urge the town to take back their commissions and committees. Have less people on them from the Highland Lake Watershed Association. And remember, the Highland Lake Watershed Association, in order to join these commissions and committees, they join as residents and citizens, not as Highland Lake Watershed Association members, because that's against their charter to get involved in this kind of thing. So what you need to do is take back your town and manage your town in a balanced manner. Grow your grand list. Get more businesses into town. Yes, will some $1 million houses on Highland Lake help? Maybe, maybe not. But most people don't understand that saving a few parcels of land at the lake that is owned by the town and not letting people have them for gardens and other things, or to extend their property rights, maybe add a garage, maybe add another bedroom for their grandchildren or children. That doesn't save the lake much. Most limnologists will tell you that it's good to have trees and it's good to have open land. But it's not an absolute necessity. If you go up towards Maine, which I do quite often, I have family up there, you'll see dead lakes all over that have no cottages on them whatsoever. Because over time, they fill up naturally and they die. Now we are trying to recede the death of our lake. We can succeed to a certain extent, but in the long run, 150 years, 200 years from now, not in our lifetime, but a long time from now, this lake will be very, very difficult. You can't help. If you can get that grand list to grow with advantageous money, then you can spend money dredging the lake. There's all kind of things that can be done to help retard the death of Highland Lake. Now, whenever I talk to limnologists, I go to all these meetings when people are trying to build in our town. I'm beginning in my old age not to go to as many as I used to. And I used to get my 2 cents in and write green papers and red papers and letters to the editor and go to the commissions and speak, and committees too. I was on a couple of the committees. I was on EDC for a while until I saw that they weren't going to do any good for anybody. They're just an advisory commission packed with people who really don't understand growing the grand list and led by people who don't want to grow the grand list if it interferes with their backyard. So I dropped off of that in about 3 months. I was in the Wetlands Commission. I was put on there because of the work I did to try to help the water on the lake, and I stayed on there for 3 years. I was on the subcommittee meeting that rewrote the section that dealt with the water parts of the regulations. I was on that committee for about a year and a half, can't even remember how long, but I dropped off when I saw I couldn't do any more good on that because it was going so well. It was so well balanced. And to this day, I still think that's one of the best commissions we have in our town. And it's not packed, surprisingly, with the Highland Lake Watershed Association, Highland Lake District people. There is balance on that in our commission. It's doing so well. Some years ago, when the gentleman was trying to build the condos on the lake that I mentioned earlier in the program, he lost. And he went to the state to appeal the decision. While he was doing that, the Planning and Zoning Group rewrote the regulations for the Highland Lake District to make it near impossible for anyone else to build condos on the lake in the future. The setbacks, side yard setbacks, are changed from, say, 15 feet to 35 feet, and other changes were made to make it more difficult for anyone to do some of the things with their property that they wanted to do at Highland Lake. A conforming property was still 4,000 square feet. If you didn't have 4,000 square feet, you had non-conforming property, which most people do throughout the lake and the town. The excuse was that they would cover too much ground and it would hurt the lake. Here we go again, say about 20 years later, with planning and zoning, trying to change the regulations again in the Highland Lake District and throughout the town and city by eliminating the very important section 10.6 that helped many non-conforming property owners do small things with their property that they desired to do. And most of these things would have led to more taxes. So, as you've heard on previous programs, a petition is circulating the town and city and lakes to get the P&Z to consider putting Section 10.6 wording back into the new regulations that are now being proposed by planning and zoning. We will go to the public hearing on September 20th after presenting the petition. We will get as many people there that are concerned about their non-conforming property as possible and plead our case. As an added insurance policy to make sure we get our word in and everybody gets a chance to speak, we will be filing an application with the town, a formal application, to include the wording, or as close to the wording as possible, of Section 10.6, and certainly the intent of 10.6 into the new regulations. They do have some wording in the new regulations that they think will take the place of Section 10.6. But until that wording is agreed, we may be able to influence it to make sure that it does replace that intended in Section 10.6 that was implemented 22 years ago and has helped many of the non-conforming property owners in the town and the lake since the people that didn't have 4,000 square feet and don't have 4,000 square feet, but property is non-conforming. Their problem was increased, of course, when they changed the setbacks many years ago to protect against condominiums and other such structures being built in the Highland Lake District. Now, once that application is submitted, which will be very soon, the town has 30 days or so to pass it through the process with the state and the town, and have another public hearing. The second public hearing, if necessary, will be held, and we will get a chance once again, if we're not successful at the first public hearing on September 20th, we'll have another chance to try to get the wording changed in the planning and zoning regulations. Now, I'm not going to discuss it too much tonight, but I do want to show you once again the petition. I'll show you a couple of the maps that will be included in the new planning and zoning regulations. You can get them on the website or pick up a copy in the planning office at the town hall. And I'll show you of the application that we will be making soon to the town in an effort to ensure that we get the proper wording in the new planning and zoning regulations to help these non-conforming property owners, which are most around the lake and many, many in town, get the few things that they need or may want over the next few years to improve their property. I just talked to a lady up the street a couple days ago who said that they would like to add a porch on the front of their old cottage at Highland Lake. And I said, well, if you want to do that, you better go down right away to the town hall planning department and talk to Steve Sedlowski or Mark, the building inspector, to see if the things you want to do with your cottage, adding a porch, etc., will be possible under the new planning and zoning regulations with their new wording that supposedly replaces section 10.6 or not. If not, you should sign the petition and come to the public hearing to help plead your case with all the other non-conforming property owners and perhaps even some conforming property owners that will be there at the public hearing on September 20th, 7 p.m. at Pearson School, unless the venue has to be changed because too many people show up. That's a rule in our town. You must be able to accommodate the people if you have a public hearing or change the venue. So tonight, I'm just going to, once again, reinforce the need for everybody who's concerned to speak up. Call up Mark Melanson in the town hall, the building inspector, and ask him any questions you want, or go see him. It'll be very obliging. The same with Steve Sedlowski. Steve Sedlowski is the land use director, and he's very cooperative. And whenever I pose a question to him, usually by email, I get a response, and it seems that he is very fair and represents the existing regulations and what he knows about the future regulations very objectively. So if you ask him any questions about whatever you, your friends, neighbors, relatives, future owners want to do with your property someday under the new regulations, he will tell you if it will be possible or not, and if not, what may be possible. Now, of course, it still has to go through the permit process, perhaps the planning and zoning process, and maybe even the zoning board of appeals process if you have a hardship. And remember, there is no definition of what a hardship is. That's one of the reasons why in the Highland Lake Association people like to all get along with each other, because it might be easier for them to get their own properties through the commissions and committees. And I do know that a lot of them don't even get permits themselves for things that they need in their old cottages. So you have to pay attention. These planning and zoning regulations are complex. And the average person, no matter how intelligent, no matter how well educated, is not able to really understand them, because they will make all kinds of decisions depending upon a lot of conditions and circumstances that may affect you. So it's best to find out. Now, if you really want to get something, I always advise people to hire a good engineer and a good lawyer, and let them do the stalking for you. They can present at meetings. They can help you plan something that will pass planning and zoning. They will keep planning and zoning board of appeals honest, because they will know the rules. And you can often get things done by using an engineer and a lawyer, sadly to say, than you can without. I talk to many people. I do recommend to them they have a good engineer and a good lawyer to help represent them with the town, but they often want to avoid the cost involved, and you can't blame them for that. They want to try to do it on their own. So either they won't get what they want, or they'll only get part of what they want. And in some cases, they may even get what they want, if they're pretty good at asking questions and understanding the regulations and getting the answers and changing their plans accordingly. They can win. But it's best to be safe, especially if you're doing big, complex jobs, because a lot of research is necessary. You have to find out what's been done on the lake in the past and why it's been done. Compare your needs to that, and then be able to ask the right questions of the planning director and the building inspector. And that's hard to do unless you have a lot of experience working with these types of regulations. 636 East Wakefield Boulevard succeeded after a year and a half or so in getting their project approved, but they had to hire an engineer and an excellent lawyer to gain their approval under Section 10.6 of the existing, up until July 22nd, planning and zoning regulations. On July 22nd, Section 10.6 was removed from the Planning and Zoning regulations by the Planning and Zoning Commission, despite attempts by 5 or 6 people to ask them to delay the decision until enough people could be told what the consequences might be for their own non-conforming property and have a chance to give feedback to the Planning and Zoning Commission. But they pushed it through. Most people think they shouldn't have done it. They should have waited a few months for the new Planning and Zoning regulations and then tried to put into the new Planning and Zoning regulations as much of the wording and intent of Section 10.6 as was possible and would satisfy property owner needs and the needs of planning and zoning, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and town management. But they didn't do that. They insisted on rushing it through, and you can hear them speaking on my previous programs, which I've now put up on YouTube, and I have the links to. I pass out the links with the petitions now, so that anybody who wants to listen to the programs before signing the petition can do so. The big push now will be to get this new application in as soon as possible to ensure that we get a second public hearing, and the other push will be to get as many people to attend the public hearing as possible after having talked to the planning director and others in the town hall, Mark Melanson, the building inspector, who gives out most of the permits, to understand if their needs will be covered in the new planning and zoning regulations. If not, they should speak up. As Ralph Nader says, speak up. Go to these meetings. Go to the town hall and ask questions. Go to these meetings and speak up, especially the public hearings. It is likely now that you will have 2 chances to speak up, if necessary, because for some reason, unbeknownst to me and others, the Planning and Zoning Commission has dug its heels in on this, and in my own opinion, acted in not a very rational manner. Experienced business people would never do this kind of a thing, voting down Section 10.6 a few months before a set of new regulations were going to come out, and all the wording wasn't in place, and the new wording wasn't approved and communicated well to the non-conforming property owners. So this whole effort has been to do that, but it's all up to you now. It's all up to you, non-conforming property owners that have and may have future needs for your development of your property, to speak up. You may not win, but you have to speak up so you can sleep better at night, and you can tell everybody in your family, in your neighborhood, your friends, etc., that you did your best to help everybody in the Highland Lake District and the town, and perhaps even some people out in Winchester, to get a fair wording of the new planning and zoning regulation laws that replace 10.6 and allows people to do things with their property that they've done over 22 years because they had Section 10.6 in the planning and zoning regulations to balance the side yard setbacks that were increased many years ago after the condos were being appealed at the state level. So get with it, read the petition, look at some of my previous programs on YouTube if you want more information, and you can actually hear the meetings and what people were saying on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I will continue to put those up until the public hearings are over, and then I'll discontinue the program. Unless they try to do some other crazy thing that will affect the property owners in Winchester, the town, and Highland Lake. We only have a few more weeks to go till September 20th. Please come back. If you've already left after Labor Day, please return and attend the public hearing. If you are still here after Labor Day and didn't leave for the winter, please read the petition, ask questions of the town officials concerning any future development on your property under the new laws, and then come to the public hearing on September 20th in the Pearson Middle School Band Room at 7 p.m. where you will hear a presentation with slides given by Sean Sudor of Graydon Land Use of the final draft of these new proposed laws, the new P&Z regulations, and you can hear for yourself and ask any questions. So bring knowledgeable people who can ask questions on the day and attend the public hearing to help everyone else balance the needs of the homeowners that have non-conforming properties. Good night.